All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Can we do a quick mic check just to make sure that everything is going good? Can I get some feedback, please, on the live chat? Loud and clear. All right. Great. Well, thanks for your attendance today to the webinar. This is another webinar in a series of webinars that the ICT Pro TT committee is putting together this year. The ICT Pro TT committee is a committee of the TT Chamber of Industry and Commerce. And the aim of the committee, and now just going to watch the transition of the slides here. The aim of the committee is to transform TNT into a digital society. And as you can see through the slides, we have a number of objectives in mind. But more practically, we are aiming at organizing different activities throughout the year to achieve that objective, namely networking events, seminars, webinars, and aiming towards a yearly signature event. We are a committee of volunteers, so we're a committee of volunteers, so obviously we can do so much by ourselves, and we look forward to your support, your help to advance this objective of ours. Today, as you know, we are going to be talking about blockchain and Bitcoin. The agenda specifically for the webinar is first explanation of what is blockchain, the technology behind Bitcoin, some specific applications of blockchain. Arvinda is going to speak of the myths and reality of Bitcoin and how does all of that apply in the Caribbean, with some considerations regarding the deployment or usage of either blockchain and or Bitcoin. We've received a large number of questions leading up to this webinar, and either from previous events or through the registration. And we will address as many of these questions as possible. We also encourage you to please post your questions on the live chat so that we can include them at the conclusion of the conversation. That should last about an hour. We hope to be finished around 1 o'clock or shortly after. The video, the webinar itself, will be saved on YouTube for future reference, so feel free to share and watch it again. So let me move on to our speaker today, Arvinda Ramprasad. I'll let you read through this long bio, but needless to say, Arvinda is the go-to guy regarding all matters of Bitcoin and blockchain. He's been in the space as an innovator and a promoter and a user, I suppose, for a number of years. And I'm sure that through this presentation, you'll understand why we invited him for this discussion. Obviously, Arvinda is doing this to promote or to provide some insight on these technologies, and we encourage you to reach out to him after this presentation for any questions you have or any ideas you want to speak to him with about. So without further ado, I'll pass on the microphone to Arvinda and let him take it from there.
Thank you. All right. So we are good to go. Right. So let's get started. So as Eddie said, today we're going to be looking at some different aspects around blockchain, the technology. I'm first going to go into a little bit of a primer on what blockchain is, what the technology is. Then after that, we'll jump across to some of the applications that you can expect to see coming up soon. Some are live, some are still in development. So we'll go through some of those, and then after that, we'll move on to some of the considerations that we, as Trinidadians, Caribbean people in the region, can look forward to or look at. And we'll wrap up with some questions that we've already gotten. So let me jump right in. So this first piece here is a video that we do not have the audio for right now because of a little bit of a technical difficulty. But effectively, what they're saying there, this is an interview from 1994 where they're talking about what the internet is. It's this strange thing that nobody's quite sure what it is. There's that funny at symbol. They don't know what to call the at symbol, and they're kind of trying to wrap their heads around what is this internet thing. And the reason I show this video is because there are a lot of really good analogies to where we are today with blockchain as a technology. We see that the technology, it's in its nascent stages, so it's not widely understood just yet. And because of the breadth of the potential that this technology has, it's something that is not the easiest thing to wrap your head around. But like with the internet, like it evolved over the last 20 years, we eventually understood what was email, how to use a website, how to things like Google and YouTube and social networks, all these things started to pop up, apps started to pop up, and as it progressed, we started to understand more and more what it is. So it's a good analogy to keep in mind of how a technology progresses and how it develops, and how in the early days it may not be too clear what it is exactly. It may be like a big kind of black box, but as it moves on, we kind of see how it gets unpacked and how it gets used. So the reason I also draw attention to the internet as an analogy is because there's a closer relation to the internet and blockchain. So the internet's key innovation when it was first introduced was the democratization of information exchange. And I want you to focus on that word information exchange, those two words, because what the internet did was it allowed persons all around the world to connect to an open network permissionlessly, freely, and to send information back and forth in any manner that they choose in small packets to anywhere they want. And that is what allowed things like anybody being able to post websites, anybody being able to freely communicate via email, anybody being able to create products and services, a lot of which we use today. It was because of that open, decentralized, permissionless nature. Now, what the internet did for information is what we're seeing the blockchain do for value. The blockchain's key innovation, blockchain technology's key innovation is a democratization of value exchange. So what that means is that we, with this technology, we're able to transfer value across these open networks, little value packets freely, permissionlessly across the globe to anyone who can connect to this network. So you can think of what implications that might have. That's a way of framing, like at a higher level, what the technology does. So getting a little bit further down into the weeds, what is blockchain? Now, blockchain it's a nebulous term. It's used to describe a new set of technologies that started with Bitcoin. Now, it gets its name from the common data structure that is used within the various implementations of this technology. So that data structure is pretty much data stored in blocks that are chained together using cryptographic hashes, but they're chained together. That's the effective thing. Now, these systems are characterized by three key things. One is that they're decentralized, they are cryptographically secured, and they are consensus driven. And let me just quickly unpack what each of those mean there. So decentralized means that there's no central point of control. There's no central point that a malicious person can attack. The entire system is distributed across the world. Cryptographically secured means that transactions and operations on the system are secured, verifiable by objective math, meaning that anybody can perform an operation and verify that something has happened for themselves without having to trust anyone or take anyone's word for it. And consensus driven means that because it's not run by any one person, there are sort of groups of persons around the world, constituencies of consensus, who operate in this sort of democratic way to govern the system, to drive changes, to make decisions about what happens, to run the networks on a daily basis. These groups work sort of in consensus to make sure that things stay up and running. So that's what we end up with when you combine those three things. These three characteristics of blockchain is a really highly trust hardened layer. And this is a cover from Economist magazine about 2 years ago, but they refer to it as a trust machine, and it is exactly that. It is that you have this layer that sits atop the network, atop the internet, and it can be used for the secure transfer of value. It can be used as a high trust network. Yeah, so at its core, the value exchange feature allows us to deal openly with strangers across the globe in a no trust needed manner. And as you can guess, what do you do with a network that is a high trust network? You put value, you put money in it, and that's logically that's how we got to Bitcoin as the first implementation of it, a digital currency. So moving on now, I want to jump really quickly to the applications of blockchain technology. Now, this is a quick little word cloud here, and this is just to it's just to show that the blockchain technology is much more than money. It's much more than just value. It can be applied to a lot of different areas of business, of logistics. It can be worked into different institutions. It has a lot of different applications. And this is just to give you an idea. It's not just money. And to give you an idea of what these applications can look like, the best way to think of it is that these applications fall into two general categories. The categories are applications where the removal of silos, the removal of walls, the removal of information and systems that are kept enclosed and separate from the rest of things. Cases where we might want that to be opened up, where we may want open sharing, where we may want things to be available at a global level. This technology can be applied to make that possible. And the second bucket of applications that we see are applications where we may be able to use that digital nature of the value that we have on the network. So we have, with blockchain technology, we have value that is inherently natively, truly digital. It's not just numbers on a screen that point to somewhere else, that point to somebody else's ledger or points to a real thing. The value sits in the actual blockchain implementations. So to move on to, let me give you all some examples, just to bring it home a little bit. Some examples of what I mean by the removal of silos. So let's take, for example, identity. Now, what I'm showing you all here right now, you'll see it on the screen in a bit, is a project that was launched recently, whose premise is based on the unbundling of identity. Now, what does that mean, unbundling of identity? Now, in our day-to-day operations, I'm sure we're all familiar with when we sign up for new accounts, when we're registering for a new service, there are forms to fill out. There are things that we must give to register for that service, little bits of identity. Sometimes it's as basic as a username, your email address, and a password. Sometimes it's more complicated. Sometimes it's your name, your date of birth, your nationality, a proof of address. It may even get to the point of certifications of character, and we have different versions of our identity, and we use them for different services. Now, what happens today in industry is that the collection of these identity verifications is duplicated massively. Everybody does their own collection, and there's significant due diligence costs associated with that. So let's say, for example, I'm going to open an account at one of the banks. If I'm going to Scotiabank to open an account, they collect my information. If I'm going to FCB, they collect my information again, and so on and so on. Now, if these institutions had a way to verify what they needed to verify without having to go through that process of collecting the information. That's something that can bring down costs. It will bring down costs for the institution themselves, and it makes the process a whole lot more seamless for the actual user. It's a process that you may not even have to go into a branch to do, that you may be able to do online. So how blockchain helps this, what Civic does as a blockchain project, is that they do the due diligence on behalf of these institutions. So they collect all the bits of your identity, and they collect it in a way where they never have control of it, where you always have control of the different bits of your identity through cryptographic keys. So you can choose, okay, I want to, if I go to a website and they have they choose to integrate this product, then you would see a little button pop up, and it says, do you want to share whichever parts of your ID through Civic? And you just say yes, and you take the parts that you want to share. It goes off to that institution, and then they're able to verify it because they know that the system does what it says it does. So that's an example of the bringing down of silos, because that identity information would have previously been stored in one silo and another silo and another silo and duplicated massively across the system. Jumping across to, let me jump into one more application of this. So here's something called Ethereum. Now, this is another blockchain project. You may have heard of this around. It can be used for a lot of different things, but what I want to talk about today is its use for equity crowdfunding. So with companies, usually if they need to raise finance, with the way things are right now, we would have to, we know that we would have to sort of go through this process where you would look for investors, you'd have to issue shares, you'd have to, there are a lot of steps. It can be a costly thing, it can be a time consuming thing, and you may not be able to get all the investment that you need to get because the market that you're trying to reach just isn't available. Now, that may not be so. We're seeing the case now with this project, with the Ethereum project, where there are other projects that are using this platform to effectively do peer-to-peer financing. What they're doing is they are launching projects. They're primarily blockchain projects right now because we still are in the early stages of this. But they're launching projects and they're creating tokens on top of the Ethereum platform. And these tokens are sort of something that they would give to persons, they would sell actually to persons who have an interest in their project or who want to lock in some future usage of that project. So effectively what they're doing is that they're able to raise money from day one using these tokens, and the persons who are interested get to have a little stake in this company. They have a claim on the future services, they have a claim on if those tokens get more valuable as the project grows. It becomes a mechanism that doesn't need intermediaries, because what we're seeing right now with these tokens, they're being offered to global markets. They're being offered online, so anybody can opt in and choose to buy some portion of tokens that they want. The companies get financing from day one, and the persons who buy the tokens also have liquidity from day one because those tokens are listed on exchanges right after. So that's another advantage compared to the existing system where you may have to wait months to years for an exit as somebody who invests in something or participates in a project. So that's another example of how when you bring down silos and you remove middlemen, how you can sort of enhance the things that the operations that we do today. Now, jumping across now to that was the removal of silos applications. I want to jump across now to that value made digital bucket that we were talking about earlier. Now, an example of how we can leverage value that is natively inherently digital is through the use of smart contracts. Now, if you think about it, if I make value digital, then I'm able to control that value with code. I'm able to set rules to that value. I can move that value programmatically, automatically. And that is essentially what a smart contract is. A smart contract is a piece of code that looks at a certain set of rules, and if certain conditions are met, it moves value from one place to another place. Now, how might this apply in, say, a real-world context? Now, let's take, for example, the issue of governance within our companies. Now, we may have, within companies, we have different, governance policies, we have different sort of budgetary restrictions. Let's take the example of a company that has, let's say, 3 departments that have to collaborate on certain projects and have to have approvals from these 3 departments to do certain spends. Now, if I wanted to, using a smart contract, using this value made digital, I can have something called a multi-signature controlled wallet. Now, let me break that down there because you may or may not have heard that term before. Multi-signature means that the wallet, the funds that are stored in that particular wallet, let's say a counter wallet, the funds that are stored there, for them to be spent, they must have the signatures from a certain number of people before those funds can move. And that is something that is not of the whim of fancy of anybody else. It is controlled by code. So if the signatures don't come in, those funds don't move. Now, what can you do with something like that? Let's say, for example, let's say you wanted to do 2 of 3 policy where any 2 of these 3 departments can approve this spend. What you do is you give 2 of those departments, you give all 3 departments, sorry, their own signature, and you assign those to that wallet. And whenever those funds need to move, all that needs to happen is that Department 1 and Department 2 just applies their signature to the funds and they're able to move. Now now what you have is a policy that is set in code. You don't need to necessarily have persons come in and audit that after. It can be audited programmatically. It's something that's a very hard coded thing. So like that's an example of what one of the applications of smart contracts. Now jumping across to another thing you can do with value made digital. This is an interesting example, micropayments, and it takes a little while to wrap your head around this one. But what would you do if you can send extremely small transactions? And when I say extremely small, I mean like if I can send 1/100th of a cent to someone, if I can send 1/100th of a cent every millisecond, if I can send it in extremely small time intervals, what can I do with that? Now, one of the things you get from that is live payments. Like you can open payment channels and have live payments flowing through a stream, and you can have that be attached to some kind of service that requires or benefits from live payments. Let's say, for example, and I'll give an example. It may not be directly applicable to a business setting, but it's an example that we're seeing right now that's using live payments. So you get to see wheels turning on. Okay, if that's what it's used for there, what can I apply it for? Now, the example I want to talk about is with a project called BitMesh, and what they're doing is that they are trying to allow persons who have mobile phones. Now, we all have mobile phones. We all have data plans. At the end of every month, we may have some extra data that just doesn't get used. It may roll over. It may expire. What these guys are seeking to do is to allow persons to effectively do a hotspot from your device and sell your data, sell your Wi-Fi. So you're able to, if like somebody can connect to your phone and they get the advantage of getting data through your phone, and you get the advantage of you being able to sell them that data. And because of the use of these micropayments, they're able to, by the millisecond, pay for the data that they draw, and as soon as they stop paying, the connection stops, or as soon as the connection stops, their wallet says, oh, I'm not getting a connection anymore, I'm going to stop paying. So you get a really fine level of granularity with that sort of thing. So that's an example there of value made digital being applied somewhere. The third example I wanted to run into is real world assets and the tokenization of real world assets. So what I mean by this is we're seeing other applications too of blockchain technology where, and this is again getting away from just the money side of things, but thinking about value more broadly. We're seeing persons putting real world assets onto blockchains by tokenizing the ownership of those assets. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, real estate. There was a pilot project, it was experimental, about a year or two ago in Honduras, I believe it was, where they were experimenting with what happens when you put real estate titles, land deeds, on the blockchain, and you make those sort of tradable on there. So what happens is that you get the transparency of being able to see how a piece of real estate moves as it trades hands, or who sold it last, or who owns it now. You get a very real-time, very granular kind of look at how that moves, and you also get the benefits of that title, that ownership, now being controlled programmatically in a similar way that we were talking about earlier with the smart contracts. Now you have something like real estate that can move through code effectively. And I mean, still all experimental, but it just kind of gets your mind turning on like, what happens if I take real world things and I digitize them? So another more concrete example is there's a company in the US, a company called T0, that is building a stock exchange on a blockchain. So what they're doing is that they're registering companies, and these shares are being issued directly onto a blockchain. And the T0 stands for time zeros. Normally in stock exchanges, you have like T2, T3. It takes 2 or 3 days to settle. T0 means that it settles instantly, and that is what they're shooting for. Because when you put these assets onto blockchains, onto this sort of technology, they're immediately movable, they're freely spendable, you get a higher degree of auditability and transparency. So that's just some examples of that application of it as well. So moving on to the next set of things, what I want to talk about now is coming back to the question of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin was one of the first things that used this technology, and there are some very specific applications that we can tie to that as well. So let's say, for example, seamless merchant processing. And when I say Bitcoin, I'm using Bitcoin and as a proxy for any sort of digital currency. Now, when I say seamless merchant processing, if you're a company, if you're a merchant of any kind, and you've ever tried to do online business, you know that there's a little bit of a challenge with being able to accept a payment online, especially in Trinidad and in the region. There can be a lot of steps to go through, a lot of approvals to get, and even at the end of that, you may not be eligible for whatever type of online payment. Now, the thing with digital currencies is that being able to accept a payment is as simple as downloading an app and generating an address on your phone. That is it. There is no central authority to register with. There is no approval to get. It's as simple as installing an app or installing a plugin to a website or pointing it to a social media page. It's as simple as that. And it's something I'll actually demonstrate at the end of this session. But the advantage you get is that you have persons now who no longer need to jump through these hoops, who can be up and running in minutes and can accept payments globally from anywhere in the world, and apply their trade. So that's one example of an application of the digital currency aspect of it. A second example is cross-border transfer as a settlement. The nature of this technology, the nature of these currencies are that they live in our networks, they live in the internet, so they don't see national borders. They, as easily as you can send an email or video chat with someone from here to another country, will be as easily as you can send value. And we know today that is not that straightforward, but with digital currencies, it gets that straightforward. So we're seeing applications right now where people are using Bitcoin and other digital currencies to do remittances. We're seeing major remittance flows from through some of the big remittance corridors in the world, like from Europe to West Africa, from the US and Europe across to the Philippines. And we know in the Caribbean and in Trinidad, we have a lot of money that comes, from a lot of remittances that come from family and friends from the US, from Europe, that come into the country, into the region. So this could be a potential solution to look at how you bring down costs and how you can improve the time that it takes to get money to different places. So that's an example of an application there, and I'll give one more. This one I found interesting. I wanted to talk about because of our unique situation in the Caribbean, because Venezuela is our neighbor. Now, when I say stateless value storage / transfer, what I mean by that is that these digital currencies aren't state-issued currencies. I've even seen one economist refer to them as synthetic commodities, meaning that they exist independently of these systems, and so they don't necessarily subscribe to the limitations of these systems. Now, as an example, in Venezuela right now, we know that that country is going through its hardships. There's some real and serious problems there. But what you're seeing is that and part of the problems too, like part of it comes with they're seeing hyperinflation with their currency. They're seeing capital controls. It's getting hard to trade with outside persons. It's getting hard to just secure your value. What we're seeing is people are starting to adopt Bitcoin to do certain things. And other cryptocurrencies. They're starting to adopt them to do remittance. Like you have family and friends who are working in the region are sending money back to persons in that country using this mechanism. We're seeing persons from within the country shop online using these digital currencies in cases where their banks aren't working and their credit cards aren't working. Bitcoin and other digital currencies continue to work, and I've read posts and articles about persons using these to shop on Amazon Pantry, and send food back down to Venezuela, or even back to Colombia, and then get it in somehow. But the point I'm making is that it represents a certain set of use cases because of that stateless nature of it too. And it's something to keep in mind, especially given that they are our neighbor. And if we do want to eventually trade with them again in an active way, or we do right now, it's an option to look at. Right. So moving on now, more specifically to business in the Caribbean. Now, this technology, like any new technology, brings with it opportunities and threats. There are certain opportunities that blockchain technology uniquely allows, and there are threats that it enables because, again, of its unique nature. So on the side of opportunities, let's talk about global market access. Now, with the internet, we saw a certain level of globalization because we were able to connect, we were able to conduct certain types of business online. But there was always that restriction, again, of being in our silos, of having these walls where we couldn't necessarily trade openly. And a lot of it has to do with payments, and some of it has to do with, the same problems we were talking about with databases and walled gardens and that sort of thing. Now, because this technology brings down those walls, it takes us a step further into globalizing our businesses and into being able to easily access markets outside the country, outside the region. So it's something to keep in mind as we move forward. The second opportunity this technology affords is for us to be able to solve that chronic problem of e-payments. And I'm sure if you have a business, if you've ever tried to set up a website or accept a payment online, it can be tricky. And especially if you're a small business, it can be even trickier. Now, these currencies, or this technology allows us to, it gives us an alternative. It gives us a way to be able to conduct economic activity over the internet in a very easy, very seamless way. So what we'll see is, from this, more types of businesses, more business models, more participants coming onto the internet, coming onto being able to access that whole internet economy, internet available services. So that is in itself an opportunity there, and something to bear in mind. On the flip side now, if we look at the threats that this technology brings, the global market access thing is a double-edged sword, because with increased global market access comes increased competition. If the borders are down, yes, you can see outside, but people can also see inside. And we will see instances where our markets are more easily accessible to global players or to players in other countries. And that's something you have to keep in mind, because the borders will be coming down, certain borders will be coming down, and certain markets will be made open and available. The second threat that this technology sort of affords is a certain level of tech disruption. And when I say tech disruption, what I mean is the disruption of existing or established business models in unique ways by new technological advances. So the easiest way to explain that is through some direct examples. Now, the first industry that may see some of this activity happening, may start to see some increased competition, or just flipping of business models, is the financial services industry. And I actually have here, let me jump to that right now. This is a neat little infographic from the World Economic Forum, and what it does is it breaks down, it sort of takes financial services and unbundles it. These are all the things that our financial institutions and banks do. It takes it and it picks it apart. And the point of this, what the World Economic Forum wanted to do with this particular infographic, is show all the different pieces of the financial services industry and show how they might be picked apart and how they are being sort of walled off. Oh, sorry, let me jump across the slide, right? So yeah, show how they're being picked apart and how they're being walled off. And it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of things that, the kind of services and the kind of areas of operation that we're going to start to see be disrupted, be like these things that the technology is going to be applied to. And I mean, down at the bottom right there, crowdfunding. We spoke about crowdfunding earlier. In the left sector there, we're seeing smarter, faster payments. Like these are the things that you'd have to sort of keep in mind. And I think we'll have show notes. We'll have links at the end, so we can link to the infographic and the report for you to look at in more detail. So moving on now so that's the opportunities and threats to business in the Caribbean. But I also wanted to mention, for us specifically in this region, for us considering this technology or considering our business landscape, that yes, there are applications that we can adopt at an individual or at an individual business level, but there are also things that we would have to do sort of in groups, as a group effort, if we really want to see this technology bear fruit. Because part of the technology's promise comes from that something called the network effect. The more users you have, the more valuable the technology becomes. And for example, in the adoption of digital identity, the function of the digital identity solution that I spoke about was to prevent replication, to draw value from not having to replicate things. But if only one person adopts it, then there's still replication in the system. So it kind of draws value from, in that specific case, from persons adopting. And like that, there are other applications where that network effect thing would play out. So it's something to keep in mind that that these technologies, yes, they are applicable as individuals or as individual companies, but some of it is sort of a group effort. And the second thing on that point is that, again, looking at just our context and our landscape, being able to have regulatory support for this technology is going to be a key thing. If we want to adopt it, there are certain things that we would need to have clarity on from the regulation in our legal system. We'd have to we have to have our regulations be able to accommodate the unique things that these technologies afford, and to be able to protect both the users, the merchants, and the users of this technology. So that's something to also bear in mind and to look at as the technology comes in, being able to put that conversation forward and to kind of make the argument that these are the things that that we want to apply it to, and here's areas that we see as a system needs to improve to help us apply this technology. So that's just something I wanted to mention as a special thing there. Now, getting into the meat of it, where will it begin? So far we've kind of covered what is blockchain technology and what are some of the potential applications of it. Now, I just wanted to caveat what we said there with that we're still in the very early stages of this technology, and a lot of these projects are just getting started. So we're seeing a lot of pilot projects, we're seeing a lot of experimentation, we're seeing a lot of sort of beta rounds, and nothing that's really fully production ready yet, but they will be in the coming months and years. So it's just more to give an idea of here's where things are heading, here's how we can think of applying these things as they become available. Now, where will it practically begin? And on this point, I want to jump back to Bitcoin and digital currencies, because this is the application of the technology that has been live and running for the last 8 years, since 2009, the last 8 years. So it has had time to mature and develop. And because of that, there are a few things about it that kind of lend it to being the place that we would start to see this technology take hold. Now, one of the first characteristics of Bitcoin is that it serves as an on-ramp to blockchain technologies. And what I mean by that is that to be able to use certain systems, let's say, for example, the crowdfunding example I gave earlier with Ethereum, to be able to access those, to be able to get to participate, what we're seeing right now is persons would usually on-ramp through blockchain, through Bitcoin, through an exchange. And like that, because of the nature of it, and because of how it's been established over the last 8 years, it practically right now serves as an on-ramp for a lot of these technologies. So that's something to keep in mind. The second thing is that Bitcoin as a system has a high level of global adoption. And what I mean by this is that the exchanges that are available in different countries, the merchant processors, the wallets, even the regulatory clarity around certain things, a lot of it is developed already around Bitcoin just because it's been around. So it's something that is already established in a lot of countries, and it's something that would be the easiest point of getting onto this technology for a lot of persons because of that characteristic. The third thing is that implementation wise, from a technology perspective, a lot of the things I talked about, so things like smart contracts, things like being able to accept payments and all those sorts of things, they're already implemented in Bitcoin, and it serves as a sort of, again, as a sort of a bridge to get onto those things. Now, specifically on the point of, let's say, payments. This is something that's really interesting, is that we already have digital payments in the Caribbean region through a few services. So like one example I wanted to give is the example of a company called Bit in Barbados. They already have a digital version of the Bajan dollar available in Barbados, and it's powered by the Bitcoin blockchain. But it's something that Bajans can trade with, and that's something that I'm assuming either them or other companies are going to start to replicate around other countries in the region. So we're going to start to see national currencies, like let's say our TT dollar, we'll have a digital version of the TT dollar being available and working like these currencies work, but it'll be a TT dollar. There's another company, an app called Abra, that does the same thing. You can, like, I have it on my phone, you can use TT dollars right now on it. It does it through a financial instrument. It's a peg, but practically it works, and persons are experimenting with it. So it's a lot closer than we might think, and it's something to keep in mind as we sort of move forward. So coming around full circle now, I wanted to give a demo as we wrap up, and what I'm gonna show, and you may be able to catch it now or not. This is a private key. This is a QR code, and I'm gonna leave it up for like 5 seconds or something, or 10 seconds or whatever it is. But you can always go back to the video and catch it if you want to catch it. But effectively, what I am giving here is a demonstration of how simple it is to use blockchain technology, because that private key, what it allows is I put about $100 on it, TT dollars on it, and effectively, I don't know who's going to take it, but all someone has to do is download an app, scan the code, and transfer those funds to their own wallet, and they've done a digital transfer. And it's something like, it's something that I sort of encourage, is that, you know, we can talk about it, we can read about it, but the easiest way to start to understand technology is to actually just play with it, put it in your hands, do some transfers, see how it actually works, and that's how it kind of gets the mind moving on. Oh, these are the implications, and these are the applications. So it's something I would definitely recommend as well. Yeah, so I think that's about it for the planned part of the presentation. I think we can probably move on to a little bit of a Q&A now. So what I want to do is, we had some questions from the registration. So I pulled out about 2 or 3 from them, and I'm going to just hit those now. But you all can feel free to also throw some questions into the chat. We have some questions from the chat as well, so I'll kind of intersperse them. We have 3 good questions from the chat here. So I'm going to do 1 from the registration and 1 from the chat. So the first one from the registration was, how do our current regulations affect the usage of digital currencies and blockchain-related services? Now, this is a good question, because to properly use this technology and these currencies, you do need to have a certain level of regulatory approval or buy-in. Now, it doesn't affect the actual usage. So if I wanted to take a digital currency and send it to you, if I wanted to accept it within my business, if I wanted to actually use it and trade with it, there is no restriction on that right now. The restrictions come in the buying and selling of those digital currencies, so the exchange of those digital currencies. That's where we would need a little bit more clarity on things. And the central bank actually put out, I think, 2 advisories back in 2014. One mid-year and one end of year, where they were speaking to that, you know, some of their guidelines around how some of the current legislation applies to the exchange, and about who can and who cannot, and how you need to be registered, and all these different things. It's very similar to the exchange of, let's say, Forex. A lot of restrictions that apply to Forex apply to digital currency exchange as well. So yeah, that's as far as I am aware, that's sort of one of the major regulatory sticking points that need to be clarified. So let's jump to a question from the live chat, and the first one is from Kieran Swift, who asks, what is likely to be the impact of blockchain on the music industry or any other of the creative industries, and how can local or regional artists and creators benefit? That's a really good question, actually, because let me talk to the music industry specifically. Now, there's a blockchain project called Ujo, UJO. I think they have a website up still. And what they're doing is that they're seeking to put they're seeking to put licenses, content licenses of creative works, and their Ujo is specifically music creative works, musical creative works. They're seeking to put those licenses onto the blockchain and to allow persons to be able to publish, trade, use, license, share using those licenses. And whenever somebody sort of accesses that music for something, so let's say I just want to listen to it, I can buy the song. If it's a song, let's say it's a song, I can buy the song for a small value. If I want to license it for reuse in something, in a show, in a movie or something, there's a different tier of license for that. And let me see. I'll see if I can pull up the site here actually as I'm talking, because it was a live thing, and you can look it up. Something called Ujo Music. Imogen Heap is a musician from the UK who had participated in that project, and she had actually she wrote a song specifically for this thing. So yeah, the website is live. Go check it out. And I think there was a demo that is no longer there's a demo that's no longer active, I believe, because I think I tried it out a little while back and I didn't it wasn't working anymore. But it was a cool thing to sort of try out too, because when you send a payment, the cool thing about the demo too is that when you send a payment, they had the entire policy built into that blockchain. So the creators, the artists, the producer, the band members, all of them had their wallets attached to the licenses. So whenever you paid to buy a song, you could actually track through the blockchain which percentage of that payment went to who, went to the label, well in this case, or went to the artist, went to the publishers, went to whoever. You can actually track that in real time through the blockchain. So that's an idea of this is a platform that's I guess it's coming live. The last time I checked this out was about a year ago. But yeah, so I mean that kind of gives you an idea of how local persons might be able to leverage that as well, because again, these things are globally accessible. So if they wanted to publish something onto a blockchain service, they'd be able to do that. So yeah, hopefully that kind of answers the question. So let me jump back to I'll jump back to one of the registration questions. Let's see what's the second question here. Do I have it? I do not have it. So I will. Yeah. So let me jump back to what I'll do is I'll jump back to live stream question, and we'll see if we can get this registration question back up. Okay, yeah. All right. So second question from Aaron Besson. How do you get your fiat currency earned in Bitcoin sales back to Trinidad and Tobago bank accounts if local banks do not want to do business with Bitcoin business until regulated? Question mark, question mark. That is a good question. Now, fiat currency earned in Bitcoin sales. Now, I can probably talk to this from the venture that we did. We did a venture, me and a partner of mine, my friend Jared, called BitBox TT. And effectively what it did was that we leveraged some platforms that we knew of to get discounts for persons on Amazon. So we actually, to do this, we actually set up a company. We incorporated a Delaware company. We set up US, we actually went through Stripe, Atlas, set up a US company, processed payments using credit card, converted it to Bitcoin using US exchanges. It was very convoluted. Then we would do the transactions that we needed to do to get the discounts, and whatever we received back, we would then liquidate through those exchanges and again store in the US bank account. We never really pull it back as a company. We left it in the company in the US. So I'm not sure how you get Bitcoin back to the national currency, to TT dollars, to store in a bank. I mean, if we had a look, the answer for that is Bitcoin is national. Bitcoin is borderless. So Bitcoin is in your hand. If you earn it, it doesn't matter if you earn it in Europe or Asia or wherever. Bitcoin is in your hand. The real question is being able to exchange it to get the national currency to put back into the bank, and that is something that we don't quite have in Trinidad yet because we do not have an established exchange just yet. So that's a little bit of a challenge with that if you want to accept Bitcoin as a business in Trinidad and Tobago right now. But I know there are companies that are working on getting an exchanges going. So I mean, look at the space, look out in the space for the next 6 months to 1 year. To see if those pop up, if they become active. I know, again, the question is waiting on certain licenses from regulatory bodies and being able to kind of make sure everything is on the up and legit before they actually launch. So yeah, that's the response to that. Now, let me jump back. I'm gonna jump back to one of the live stream questions here. Sorry, one of the registration questions, and I'll leave the slides down for now. But the question asks, how practical is Bitcoin or blockchain as a solution to the foreign exchange crisis we face in Trinidad and Tobago? Funnily enough, that's a question that I actually get a fair amount of, I get a question a fair amount of times. And the answer is directly, it doesn't help because Bitcoin or the other digital currencies are in themselves a form of foreign exchange. So that's why you're asking, okay, I can't, and I'm guessing the angle that this question is coming from is a business that probably needs to resupply and needs US dollars to be able to pay its suppliers. And they're probably looking or wondering if Bitcoin can be used as a method to get payment to those suppliers. Now, remember, the problem is not necessarily the transfer of payment. The problem is converting your local currency, your TT dollars, back to a foreign currency. And because there are no native exchanges in Trinidad right now, there aren't any ways to convert TT dollars to Bitcoin. And even if there were, I'm guessing that the price would be at a premium to reflect the scarcity of foreign exchange because it in itself is a current exchange. It's kind of like asking, it's kind of like asking, I can't get US dollars for my TT dollars to be able to pay my suppliers. Can euros help? It's the same problem. So that's the answer to that one from our perspective. I'm gonna jump back to a live stream question now from Kendall Ano. How stable is the technology today and the feasibility of future potential for developing dApps in relation to my industry as a web developer? So how stable is the technology today and the feasibility of the future potential for developing dApps? And dApps are decentralized dApps. So feasibility-wise, the technology is at a point right now where a lot of the infrastructure is being built. And what I mean by that is that the basic services that we need to interact with this technology and use the technology are still being iterated upon. So for example, for dApps, decentralized dApps, the major platform for that is Ethereum. And okay, so this answer is more to developers. So if you get a little bit lost along the way, it's because it's a more developer targeted answer. But yeah, so dApps are right now, a lot of them are written for Ethereum, and Ethereum as a blockchain is pretty developed, but it still has its little teething problems. So what we're seeing right now is that apps are being written, but they're not being put into production just yet. They're being done as experimental things. They're being run on like sort of test nets, and maybe even there are live implementations, but they aren't widely adopted just yet. But I would say future potential wise, it makes sense to start to learn how these things work, start to learn the language. So Ethereum, I think, is Solidity. That's the language that they use to write smart contracts. It makes sense to start to learn it now, because if you learn it now, with the way that the technology is progressing, these sorts of dApps are going to start to become more mainstream in, like, let's say, the next 1 to 3 years, and they'll start to find applications in more and more places as the technology evolves, as more companies adopt it. You will find that the need for dApp, decentralized app developers, will grow with that. So it couldn't hurt to start learning now, start experimenting now, and start like figuring out how to put together these things so that when the demand comes, you're already in a position to be able to capitalize on it. And I think we have one more question here from the registration. Okay, this is a sticky question. Can you comment on some of the other blockchain-related products we're seeing marketed locally as investment products? ... Example, OneCoin. Okay, so my general take on these sorts of things are, and I've written a few blog posts about this that I'll probably also see if we can link later. But my general thing is that this is a very nascent space. It's very technology heavy. Putting in money into it from the view of investing, you have to consider it as seed or pre-seed. Like it's like seed or pre-seed investing, and like that's a term they use in venture capital investing. And what that means is that you have to be able to look at the specifics of the technology and make a judgment call on, is this something that will be needed? Is this a trend that will play out? Is this something that will gain traction and it's effectively a bet you're making, an educated bet, but a bet no less. And that is how angel investing and venture capital funding works. And I mean, when people work in that space, they also apply certain risk management practices to make sure that they can, their money grows and is not lost, because it's very extremely high risk products you're dealing with. Now, my thing with the products that I marketed locally as investment products is that I have very low confidence in them. And the reason I say that is because of the way that they're marketed. They're marketed to persons who are not tech savvy. They're marketed in ways that when we look at some of the folks who I know in the technical community locally and abroad, who look at like the specifications of these things, they scream hype, and they scream this is not a real product. They scream that, and I mean we can only go with what we see on the surface of it. We can only go with what they describe and how they market themselves, and I mean this is just from our perspective. Because it's high risk, the way that they market it is not genuine. They market it in a way that the persons who are sort of targeted to buy into these things, we're not sure if they understand the technology, they understand what they buy into, or if they even understand how to manage a portfolio properly, how to apportion risk properly for the nature of these technologies. So that's why I say, generally with these sorts of things, understand what you're getting into. If you do not understand the technology, if it's a big black box to you, then please stay away. Like that's always the best advice. If you can't figure out what exactly is happening, and if you're seeing a bunch of hype and a bunch of keywords and buzzwords, and if somebody is coming at you really hard and promising guaranteed returns, it's not a space that generates guaranteed returns. It generates sporadic returns, if any. So just bear those sorts of things in mind. Right, cool. So I think we're just at about the 1 o'clock mark there. Hopefully this was useful. Hopefully some of this made sense. I'm not sure if all of it did, but hopefully you gained something at least from it. You have an idea of where this technology is coming, where it can fit in. It's all still in development, but it will be coming down, and we will start to see applications later on. So it doesn't help to start to sort of think of, well, how will this affect my business model, or how can I adopt it, or what things do I need to look out for? So yeah, that's about it for now. Thanks. Right. Yeah. Let me so we're just gonna do a quick closing thing here. 1 second while we pull it up. Where did the mouse go? Did I get nope? Wrong one. All right, just bear with us 1 second. We're trying to get the slides back up. The slides kind of went down a little bit in the course of presenting that. All right, cool. So
well, as Arvinda said, we reached 1 o'clock, and I think we've covered all the topics we wanted to cover. So I want to thank Arvinda again. I think judging by the feedback from everybody was very satisfied. I think everybody learned a lot. I want to reiterate the fact that the presentation will remain on this channel for as long as necessary. Hold on, is it still on? And I want to just wrap up this webinar by mentioning our next events. Whoop, they've disappeared again. Give me just 1 second while we bring back the slides. All right, that should do it. Sweet. Right, so our next events, the events organized by the ICT Pro Committee, the committee of the Chamber of Commerce. On September 5th, we have an event called The Impact of Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning on the Legal Community. This is a live event. You can register for it on the ICT Pro TT website. And on the 7th of September, we have another webinar when we're going to present the state of things, basically, on government e-services. This is going to be presented by some members of iGov TT. And hopefully you can join us for that event as well. That one is a free webinar as today. And we will certainly send you updates, send updates to those who've registered today. We will send you some updates via email and encourage you to register at www.ictprott.com and check us out on our social media channels. So once again, thanks for being with us and have an excellent rest of the day.